The DEA is changing its tune on marijuana, but only slightly. Now, the Huffington Post reported that the new DEA head, Chuck Rosenberg, had told reporters at a Wednesday morning conference at the administration's headquarters that, quote, heroin is clearly more dangerous than marijuana. Progress. Now, maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I think that this is the start of a possible shift in the thinking of the agency, and maybe would lead to a bit of a culture change inside of the DEA. Call me hopeful, but I am. Now, if you can remember, as I said, this is a step up. Because if you can remember, former DEA head Michelle Leonhardt, who resigned earlier, by the way, amid allegations that DEA agents participated in sex parties with prostitutes in Colombia. Sex parties with drugs. Sounds like an awesome time, but nonetheless, hypocritical, much. She couldn't even admit that marijuana might not be as unhealthy as heroin or crack. Now, I remember going after her about that. Like, she couldn't even tell the difference. She couldn't even admit that marijuana was safer than heroin or crack. It's pretty obvious that it's much safer than heroin or crack. And there are so many studies out there that say that prove that. There's data out there. She couldn't even fucking Google it. Well, of course, her administration was very, very hard on marijuana. This administration seems to be going in sort of the opposite direction, although very slowly. Oh, for example, now the new DEA head, right? Rosenberg says he still wants the DEA to enforce current marijuana laws. It is federal law. It hasn't been repealed yet, right? But he thinks the agency should focus on the biggest and most important cases there are, and that the heads of the DEA bureaus around the nation should also concentrate on the most important cases in their jurisdictions. Typically, he says, that is heroin, opioids, meth, and cocaine, in roughly that order, and marijuana tends to come in at the back of the pack. Now, I still don't understand why marijuana is a Schedule I drug. You know how many people died from a marijuana overdose? 0. Dick. Nobody died from a marijuana overdose. It's impossible to die from a marijuana overdose. Very easy to do so from crack, cocaine, some of these other drugs, meth, heroin, all that. Very easy to die from an overdose. In fact, prescription drugs are much more dangerous than marijuana. You can overdose on those. You can overdose on weed. It just doesn't happen. There's no cases out there. It's impossible. And yet, here we are, Schedule I. It has to get out of that scheduling. Maybe that's what they'll do eventually. As I said, for this, I know those of you listening are probably saying, look, this isn't huge news. Come back when there's an actual big change. But remember, on new policies and changing of old policies, Washington moves about as fast as a turtle stuck in molasses. Right? It takes a while. And the example that I want to give you is gay rights. Look, in 2012, Biden made his famous so-called gaffe, right? Where he said, oh, I'm comfortable with gay rights, with gay people getting rights, gay people getting married. Now, that touched off a bit of an avalanche when it came to gay rights. DOMA fell. States started legalizing same-sex marriage. Went to the Supreme Court. It hit a tipping point. And now, as you can see, it rolled very fast downhill. Same-sex marriage is now legal in 50 states. It just took getting up to that hill and then rolling down. And then it became legal. I think it's going to be the same way with marijuana. And look, we already have 4 states in the District of Columbia that have legalized recreational marijuana. That's more than a lot of people thought we'd have at this point. And 23 states so far have legalized medical marijuana. Now, I think within the decade, and I've made this prediction before, 10 years, we're going to have most states that are legal, that have legalized marijuana. Or at least at the federal level, we've decriminalized it. I guarantee 10 years. We'll see. Within the decade, we're going to see marijuana at least decriminalized all across America and legalized in most places for recreational use. But in order to get there, you have to take small steps to hit that tipping point. And I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think the softening of rhetoric from the DEA, I think that's a small step in the right direction. Hear me now, quote me later.